Hey guys, this is Michael Tirala from Qlik. In this video, I will walk you through assigning user access to the Sense system that we installed in the previous video. But before I do so, I'd like to briefly discuss the Sense token licensing model and how it relates to the two types of access passes available within Sense. So, simply stated, the token licensing model allows an organization to manage its own software usage by utilizing a pool of tokens that have been set within the software license agreement. It's financially feasible because the organization does not need to worry about purchasing the wrong type of license that might wind up going unused or worry about purchasing too many or too little. It's great for unpredictable usage patterns in the beginning because once the organization has an understanding of how Sense will be used, they can allocate and reallocate access as needed from the pool of tokens. All of this is self-managed through the Qlik Management Console, so the organization does not need to go back to Qlik to make software license changes, unless they have exhausted their token pool and require more. So there are two types of access passes. Simply think about them as passes for the frequent user and passes for the infrequent user. A user access pass is assigned to a unique identified named user that has unlimited access to Sense apps, streams, resources, etc. A user with this pass pretty much logs in daily, creates, analyzes, and shares a variety of content on a frequent basis. Now, a login access pass is used for general consumption, anonymous access, temporary users. It provides the same app and resource usage as a user access pass, but it's attached to a licensed rule that customizes and controls its usage and also has time limits on how long the pass can be used before another one is consumed. So a number of tokens are allocated to both of these pass types, and they're allocated differently. Let's take a look at this in more depth using the following diagram. So as I stated, the tokens are assigned within the license agreement. So in this example, we have the software license represented by the symbol, which comes with 100 tokens. So when we registered or activated the license after the Sense installation, we now have 100 tokens that we can choose to allocate to these appropriate access types. So that is what the token pool represents here. Now we have the option to allocate one token to one user access pass. So the ratio here is 1:1. This is for the frequent identified users, as I mentioned. There is an optional license rule that can be attached to these as well to further customize the access. But that's the simplified approach basically when allocating users 1:1 utilizing what's called the user access pass. So one access pass, one token. So if we assigned 5 users, there'd be 95 tokens left based in the token pool. Now the other access pass is the login access pass. And what you do here is assign a block of tokens to a particular group that you identify. And inside that group, you then provide a license rule that identifies the group of users. And there's a number of different identifiers and properties that could be set up within that license rule. As of the recording of this video, one token is equal to 10 login passes, and that is for the infrequent users, the anonymous users. They have the full access to the streams and the apps and stories, etc. However, their sessions when they log in are valid for 1 hour. You also have the ability to use up to 5 devices with this particular login access pass. So a couple things to remember here is that it might be possible that multiple users could use up the login access pool. And if they do so, it might be determined that we need to reallocate those particular users and give them their own named or identified access utilizing the user access pass. Also note that when a login access pass is used, it is not freed up and returned to the login access group until 28 days later. Okay, so this is allowing you to throttle the type of usage within the environment. Understanding once again that if you notice that your pool of login access based off your tokens is used up, you have an option to either allocate more tokens to assign more login access passes or then assign the appropriate usage based off of the patterns that you've noticed. Okay, so let's go into the demonstration to show this. So a quick mention before we go into the actual exercise to allocate the user access. Note that the documentation available on the help site completely outlines a lot of what I presented, and available with the information kit or the welcome email or whatever notification you get that points you to other resources there is a guide called the Information Guide to Allocating Access Passes, which kind of gives you some of that in-depth detail and also describes some of the particulars when installing Sense on a local platform where you have not connected it to a directory connector such as LDAP or an Active Directory. There's a couple things you can use for testing that will walk you through that, and I'll discuss that as well. So note that the help site and the Qlik Sense Platform Information Guide to Allocating Access Passes is also available to help you learn more and understand more about this process. Okay, so what we're going to do is go over to that instance where we set up the Sense platform. Now note, we did a default installation, a single node or a single site on a single machine. We did not connect this to any user directory connector like LDAP or Active Directory. There are options to do so. What we have here is the local security that is based off the operating system. So we're just going to tie into that. Future videos down the line will go into additional security configurations and etc. So keep that in mind when I allocate user access. I'm just going to be utilizing this local security layer for that access. So what we're going to do is start the management console. So where we left off was at the management console. I am logging in with the default ID that we installed the platform with, which is sense_system. Okay, and I want you to take note that there is this welcome screen. There's also another video that's going to go into the orientation and navigation of this interface, so stay tuned for that as well. So by going into the users, we can see all of the users that have been synced with this particular local installation. So now by default, you will see this particular user, which is the user we installed the system with. That user is also the default root admin of the system. Now recently I just allocated another local user to be used as a default admin. In order to get these users in the list, please keep note, we don't add users to Sense as you would in a traditional system, such as add new user. What we do is allocate the users, and the users are brought in from the directory connector that is configured. So you basically sync that particular user authentication provider with the repository of the Sense system. By default, we just pull in the user that we have installed the system with. Now we can get other users into the local system for testing, and there's a couple approaches to doing that. A quick example is located in that guide where you can log into Sense, note that you don't have access to Sense, and then that user will then pop up. So let me give you a quick example of that so you can see what I'm talking about. What I'm going to do is just go into another browser session, go into Qlik Sense. There's that message again in regards to the certificate. Just going to proceed, and I'm going to log in with user 1, and then the password here will just be, I think it was password. Okay, and you'll see a message, you cannot access Qlik Sense because you have no access pass. Okay, now upon doing that, if we go back into the console and refresh the user list, you will see that now user 1 is applied. So take note, when you have a directory connector, you can sync and it'll automatically populate this list. The way I just showed you is a quick way to test to get the user into the system. So at this point, I can edit this particular user. I can change their admin role to become a root admin of the system, a content admin, etc. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out to you in regards to these particular users. So with that user being available in this list, I can allocate that user for a user access pass, like I described in the presentation. And we do that by going to License and Tokens. And then we go over to User Access. And you can see I've already allocated the user MTO. I'm going to allocate the other user we just added by logging into the system. User and as well as Sense system. So for you, it most likely will be the ID that you installed the system with, in this case Sense system. And you can do multiple selections by holding the control key and select allocate. And that's pretty much all you need to do to allocate a user access pass to a particular user. So that is that 1-to-1 ratio. So if we go back by clicking Start and we go to License and Tokens, what you'll notice is that we have used 3 user access tokens, and you can see out of 10,000, now 9,997 are left. Okay, so now let's say we want to allocate other usage. Okay, so we're going to do that now by selecting what's called the login access. And as I mentioned, within login access, you create a group, And that group could be assigned whatever you want to name it. Let's just give an example such as human resources. Maybe later on in my configuration I'll create a role and assign users to that role. And then the number of tokens we want to allocate. So let's just allocate, let's just say 5. So what this is going to do now for 5 tokens, I'll click apply, and it'll open up this rule. Okay, but what 5 tokens is doing is basically allowing now 10 access passes per token, or 10 login access passes per token, so for a total of 50 login access passes. So that means I have 50 login access passes that I can use. People can log in, we can set them up as anonymous, they have an hour session to use them, and based off of that, once the session is done, if they log in again, it'll use another login pass and so forth. And as I mentioned earlier, with the potential to use up all those login passes, if we see a particular user is doing that, we have tools that will monitor that process. We can then decide if we want to change that user over to a user access pass. So simply the way to do this now is you have these identifiers, the user, the appropriate identifiers. You can actually say if the browser that they're using, the directory they're coming from, if they have a defined role, the user ID, specific name. You could also put in custom properties as well. So in this case, to keep it simple, we're going to say where the username, and you can see is equals or like, and then a particular value. In this case, the value we're going to use is asterisk. Okay, you can see we could have selected from a list of different users that have been identified, but here if I just say asterisk, what that's going to allow us to do is every user that logs into the system that is not within that named list is now going to have login access pass as well. So that's what that particular rule does. So we click apply to that particular group, and then what we're going to do now is let's open up another session. Okay, so we already assigned the user 1 the ability to have a dedicated user access. So what we're going to do is let's open up that browser session again, go over to Qlik Sense. I'm just going to proceed, and then we're going to log in as user 2. Okay, and as you can see here, we have a variety of different users. Now, the user 2 has not been specifically allocated as a user access, but we did set up the login access group with the star or the asterisk for the security rule. So upon logging in, we will now have access to the system, and I have access to do whatever it is based off of my security rule settings for an hour. Just so you know, there is optional security rules that, again, in the documentation where we can specify specific resource access and particular actions and so forth. So keep that in mind. So now that particular user has been also listed. As you log in, it becomes listed. You can set up other properties for that particular user as well. So now if we go back into license and tokens, we can see the distribution of login access versus user access. And then also, if we go into the login access, you can see that the used login access passes is 1, remaining login access passes is 49, and there's 5 tokens that are allocated for that, as I mentioned. Okay, so as more users that log in, this number will start to drop, and it will not be replenished until 28 days later if those access passes have not been used. So hopefully this will get you started with access to the system. The next set of videos that are going to come out are going to cover security and architecture. We're also going to go into the navigation and orientation of the Sense interface. Please note that some of this content is similar. The creation of the analytics and the visualizations and the chart objects are very similar to the way it's done within Sense Desktop. So some of it might be repetitive. Some of the videos might point you over to just how it's done in Sense Desktop in order to avoid a repetitive video collection. Okay, so again, hope it was helpful. Comments or questions within the comment or discussion box, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next video. Take care.